What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. Are you always waiting for something to get better, hoping that, if I just get this done, then life will be good, or if I just get to this point or have this much money? Well, today you're in luck. We're going to talk about why you should stop wasting your life waiting for the perfect moment. But before we get into that, if you guys have questions or if you have self-help topics you'd like us to address, please, feel free to drop us episode ideas. You can leave a comment on the in the YouTube videos, or you can find our email in the show notes. But anyway. So, I think this is a good topic. Do you feel like you've ever wasted time waiting for something to happen and hoping?
So this one like hits home because I
Yeah,
have this I have this dream life that's written down that I'm not living. It's
yeah,
like it's like all the things that I want to do, be, and have, but I'm just not doing it. Partially because I'm afraid of being disappointed if I do it and it just doesn't live up to my expectations.
that is scary,
But
isn't
yeah,
it though?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Because then,
yeah.
what do you do then, right? Like, if it sucks,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like, do you modify it regularly?
So yes, because I would say like, 80 to 90% I'm living my dream life, but there are certain things that I just haven't done. Like, for instance, like getting a dog, just because I love dogs, but I
There's
just
a
don't
lot
really live
attached
the,
to it. Yeah.
yeah, I don't live the life right now that's like conducive to that. And
No,
also
you're also
like,
in a city and stuff. It makes it a lot harder to
yeah.
take care of the dog in general. I mean, like it does.
Right. So all of these things kind of add up, but it's still there. And actually, I've been messing around with GPT a whole bunch, and I was actually using that to generate images of my dream life. I was like, these are all
Oh,
the things that are in
nice.
my dream life. Generate this image, and it's crazy because it does it so
Yeah,
realistically. I was almost like living there in that environment, and I was like, whoa, that's
that's
crazy.
cool.
And but it's I'm holding those things at bay because also there are other things that like I've done and I've been disappointed. Particularly if it's something that I buy, like buying anything, I just get disappointed by stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And
Well, no,
yeah,
I
but
do too. I find that, dude, like buying stuff, I'm constantly just like it's very rare that I'm not disappointed in things. Except
Mhm.
but I think like that's why I buy so little now because the things I do buy I usually am pretty happy with because they're things that I really, really want and really need for something rather than just like
Mhm.
arbitrary purchases, you know?
Yeah.
No, I think
So in terms of those things, I'm putting them off. And then also there's the other stuff where like I I deceive myself into thinking once I do that, then I'll be prepared. Or
yeah.
once I do that, then I'll be confident. Or once I do that, then it'll be easy. And that's
Yeah.
never the case, but I just delude myself
Well,
constantly.
I think that's the problem though, is a lot of this future thinking and I guess I would say like wishing, for things is really self-delusion, a lot of it. And like even the dog, like all things are trade-offs, right? Yeah, getting a dog that comes with a ton of so many good I would argue so many good things that outweigh the annoying things. But there's annoying things, right? Like even when you don't feel good, you gotta take the dog out. You gotta
Right.
feed
And
it.
if you want to travel, you got to find somebody to
Figure it
watch the
out.
dog or take the dog
Yeah.
somewhere. And even if everything works out after 8 to 15 years, the dog's going to die and you're going to be heartbroken. So like
Yes.
all of
Yeah.
those things, like I consider that
Well,
stuff, and I'm just like, I'm not sure if I could handle that.
it's funny. Like, Anna and I talk about that all the time because we have a dog and we take it with us when we travel because it just tends to be easier, honestly, than trying to find somebody and all that and less expensive. And so it's great and we don't mind, but it also, it cuts into a lot of things. If we want to go out to dinner, you're limited due to you have to find a place and a lot of places are pretty dog friendly now, which is nice, but in the winter and stuff, it makes it really hard to do stuff like
Yeah.
that. So it's like you don't have the options that you would have if you were just by yourself. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally
Or if your
understand that.
dog gets diarrhea, you're
Yeah.
waking up every 10 minutes throughout the night and you're going to have to replace your carpet.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right? These things happen and you have to kind of be willing for those trade-offs. But I think that's kind of the problem though. I think we have this in our head we get these ideas of perfection,
Mhm.
but they're never going to happen. Like when people think of getting a dog, they think of all the good times and they don't think
Oh,
of
and they
all
see
that
him as a
stuff.
puppy.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly, right?
remember my brother was telling the story about his kids wanting the French Bulldog. They saw the French Bulldog puppies and they wanted it
Yeah.
so bad. And then they saw an adult French Bulldog like months later and they're like, ew, what is that thing? And he's like, that's the puppy that you wanted so desperately a couple
That's the
months
same
ago. And they're
thing.
like, no.
And it'll look like that in about 3 months.
Yeah, right.
That is the
Oh
worst
my God.
part. Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is funny. I feel this way all the time though, dude. I really do because it's like or I don't like, it's easy to get stuck in this thinking, I think, where you just you imagine like all I need is this to happen and then things will be better. And then it can be a sort of, I think, like a almost like a form of procrastination and like self-limiting where you put off taking action because you're waiting for like, let me rephrase this so it makes more sense. It's like waiting for the perfect moment. Like when you hear people talk about like I've met people that like really want kids, but they're like, we're just not ready yet. We just need to get
Hmm.
this done and this done. And then 5 years later, they're still talking about that, right?
Hmm.
Or somebody wants
Yeah.
to change their job and they're like, well, I just need this to happen. And I'm just waiting to have this much in my bank account. But then something happens, like their car breaks down, and then that sets them back. And they're still doing this years later, they're still doing the same thing. So it's like we set these arbitrary conditions up
Hmm.
thinking that that would be the perfect way for this to happen, but life's never perfect.
Hmm.
And so, in a way, it's like self-sabotage because we're never going to have those conditions met that are going to enable us. Like, I think a lot of times it's much better just to kind of like jump in the water than to try to, like,
Yeah.
not actually when you're going in water because I don't like doing that, but like in life, rather than trying to get like, comfortable with the water, just jumping in because it's going to
Yeah.
make things like when we started
This is
learning
an
programming.
analogy, not in real life.
Yeah, not in real life though. When it's
Well, it's
actual
kind of like
water.
that. It's kind of like that saying, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Yeah, I mean it is,
Uh-huh.
right? It's like, yeah, I think a lot of times, like, do you think everything back when you're like a lot of times, like, and like the choices you made and wondered, like, did I actually make that choice, or was it just like what was convenient at the time, or what happened to me, you know,
Mhm.
like, as
Yeah.
opposed to a choice?
And
Yeah,
and like a lot of times, because if you look, I get stuck in this all the time where like I look back and I have more information at my fingertips now because I
yeah,
see how things turned out. And so like it seems like why would I make that choice? But at that time, I didn't have all of this information.
no,
Like, I mean, we did an episode a while ago on regrets, and like one of the biggest regrets that I have is just that I didn't do wrestling in like middle school and high school.
yeah,
Because like I like to get into fights and I would get in trouble all the time because of that. And I like to do martial arts and jujitsu. And I'm like, I completely missed an opportunity just because you had to wear spandex. And yeah, it
and
was
probably get
like,
ringworm occasionally.
yeah, exactly. But like it's one of the biggest regrets because that was like a free like 7 or 8 years of just like this awesome education what could have been. And so anyways, but yeah,
Well, no, but
it's
I totally
hindsight's
understand.
2020.
It is. It's a bitch, right? Because you look back and it's like all these things you could so clearly see because you know what you want now. But when you're a kid, you don't know. And there's all those other factors involved of like, you're worried about your clique, you're worried about your social standing, all this BS, all that other stuff that gets in the way of your decision making when you're young, especially when you're young, I would argue, right?
Mhm.
I think it gets easier when you're older. But yeah, it's hard. It is. And I do think we self-sabotage it in the moment. We set up conditions to kind of make it harder for ourselves to do these things. Because I was thinking, like when we started learning programming, I think that was like one of the best ways. Like it was not a good time in the sense that like everything
Well,
was
I remember
perfect.
because we were discussing it, and you're like, "Now is not a good time," and I was like, "Yeah, it's not a good time for me either, but it's starting now, so
Yeah,
might
so
as
we
well
just
just do it."
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that was like probably the best thing we could have done because otherwise we would have pushed it off. I mean, because it's the
Mhm.
natural thing to do, right? It's like you have these dreams, you're like, yes, I really want that. But at the same time, you're like, I'm also not ready. Because like
Mhm.
starting something new is going to take well, especially learning like a new skill like that, it's going to take a ton of work, which it did, right? It's also going to take up a lot of time. It's going to mess up your schedule completely. And even though it makes life better, it makes everything else harder for a while. Because like finances, right? You have to pay for things or like this and that. And it's like you have to be willing to take those chances. And it might not turn out to anything. That's the other scary thing, I think, that a reason why we do this is that, you know, we have these dreams, but we also don't know what's going to happen. Whether we're afraid of success or afraid of failure
Mhm.
or whatever, it could also just not work out sometimes. And then, it's like you feel like a failure, you spent this time, and it's like, but at least you tried.
Isn't that crazy? We pretend we can predict the future. We're like fortune tellers. We know that like once this happens, then the next thing will happen, and it very rarely happens like that.
It never happens like that.
Yeah,
Like
never happens
never.
like that. Yeah.
There's very rare
Another
cases
thing
where that's the case.
Another thing that I was thinking about with this, like, why are you waiting? Uh, is just we're oftentimes putting off actually being happy and enjoying our lives
Yeah,
until we have something or achieve something or get something. And like I think about this particularly with possessions because there are certain things that I buy that like before I have them, I'm convinced that like once I get this, that'll solve everything. And like I'll
yeah,
be happy forever and ever.
yeah,
And then I get it and 2 days go by and I completely forgot about it and it's gathering dust on the shelf or whatever. But like it's I oftentimes go back through where I live and I just look around at these things and I'm like, man, this was something that like my happiness depended upon it and now I don't even think about it and yet I'm moping around unhappy. So what's going on?
yeah, right.
It didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work out. You know, it's funny. Did you ever feel bad? Did you ever get something you really wanted to, and like using it involves some time commitment, and then you feel bad for not doing it as often as you thought you were going to do it when you originally got it? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything like it's I've been struggling with this a lot recently is just being overcommitted and not only being overcommitted, but also wanting to be very successful or perfect in all of the things that I'm doing.
Yeah,
And that
which
has
is
caused
like,
me insane stress recently. Like here's another thing that I was using ChatGPT for was as basically a therapist. I was like
it
going
actually is a
through,
very good therapist,
dude,
though.
incredible.
Well, no,
Absolutely incredible.
they did a study actually. I remember reading about this where like it's very good at it apparently. Like, and because it listens, it
Yeah.
gives good
Yeah,
response.
it
And
empathizes with you and it doesn't get offended.
no, you can say whatever you want to it. And the other thing that's nice, it's private.
Yeah.
You're not talking to a person. So you can say whatever
Yep.
the hell you want. And you don't have to feel like, because I think a lot of times when people go to
And
the
you can
therapist,
delete it afterwards.
yeah, people
Yeah.
rationalize and stuff. You don't even have to do that with this. You can just say what's on your mind, right? Which is kind of
Yep.
interesting. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you
Dude,
off, but
it's
yeah.
but no, you're completely right because it's been incredible. Like I just gave it a prompt like you're a therapist with like very high empathy. I'm going through a problem. Help me with this. And the crazy thing I did, so like after I was talking for a while and uh and kind of working it out, I asked it. I was like, if you were in my shoes, what would you say to yourself? And
Huh.
I was blown away with how helpful that was.
Well,
It
that's
was just
cool.
like, wow, that is like spot on. Yeah, so it was super helpful. I would encourage people who are to mess around. I mean, clearly it doesn't replace a mental health professional. It's probably better than them, but it doesn't replace one.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, the
yeah.
difference I think with a real mental health professional, if you find a good one, is you have a relationship with a regular person,
Hmm.
which is a little different. There is a difference, but I think that you're right. Because, like, dude, people have bad days. Not
Yeah.
everybody's equally good at their job. ChatGPT is consistent. As long as you
Yeah.
prompt it the same, it's going to be just as good, And I think that's kind of interesting
Yeah,
to
and
think
there's this
about.
study. So I listen to a whole bunch of stuff on the Feeling Good podcast, and anyone who's listening who deals with anxiety or depression, check out the Feeling Good podcast because that will
Everybody.
blow your
To
mind.
everybody.
Yeah, ever it will blow your mind. But I've been listening to it, and so like one of the problems with therapists is that they're human.
Yeah.
And so, and not only that, but they've been trained that when a patient criticizes you, they're deflecting or they're trying to put something on a therapist instead of actually that they're saying something of truth.
Yeah, the
That
therapist
like the
might be
therapist
failing in a
needs to
certain
find some
respect.
truth in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the therapist needs to find the grain of truth in it. So they went through like all of these archives of recorded therapy sessions that they had. Like I think it was like 5,000 or 50,000 therapy sessions. And every single time when the patient said something critical of the therapist got defensive and
Yeah.
said, like, yeah, like you're wrong, or are you projecting your father on me, or whatever, something like that.
That's not surprising though, because they come from academia, which is very, very, like I think when people get into this higher level, especially PhDs and stuff, it's like, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You're
And it's
wrong.
also
You're
just
not therapist.
uncomfortable. Like when somebody
Yeah.
criticizes you, it's uncomfortable to find the grain of truth in it and to agree with them.
Especially in
Because,
the moment too,
yeah,
because you're doing a
yeah,
job where you're supposed to be, the therapist is the authority in that situation. So you don't want,
hmm,
we don't like that idea of questioning authority, challenging authority, it's like, which is ridiculous because you're just people. Like, it's
hmm,
very funny how, I don't know, up in arms we get about everything. When it's like,
yeah,
yeah, very weird.
yeah. So, more about what was the question again? Why are you waiting?
Why are you, so it says, stop waiting for, stop wasting your life waiting for the perfect moment. But I
Okay,
think,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Okay,
Seem like
so
you were excited.
I think this is a good thing for like the deathbed scenario. Because I do this all the time. Like one of them, a lot of times when I go walking, I listen to like motivational videos. And one of them has like the beginning of it or somewhere, and it says like if you had 6 months left to live, what would you do differently? And every time I listen to that, like I start brainstorming. Like if I seriously, you know, now it's February, if in August I was gonna die, like what would I do? And it's I think that's really helpful for lighting the fire underneath you in terms of what to do because it brings it into reality.
Yeah. No, it does. I think that's a really good way to look at it. That's a good, it's like there's a lot of good exercises you can do like that to help you think about like what would I really want? And I think the first part of that's really important is stop wasting your life. Like, and it's sad, but so many people, and I did the same thing, are wasting their lives, not doing things that they want to do for really stupid reasons. Like, really, and I'm not saying that like I'm not criticizing. I'm criticizing myself too here, like just to be fair.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we do it because we're afraid of what other people are going to think. We do it because we're afraid of succeeding. We do it because we're afraid of changing
Because
our
it's
lives. Yeah,
uncomfortable.
because it's uncomfortable, because of different circumstances, because we don't think we're good enough. All this BS that has nothing to do with anything. And instead of actually like living a life that maybe won't be perfect, but would be better, and maybe in one
Yeah.
in which we'd be happier, we settle for like just garbage. And I think that's just terrible. Like we could be doing so much more if we just took action, but it means you have to take action. And that's the
Well,
hard part.
I like what you said there because while you were saying that, it reminded me of like the biggest motivator for me was my life becoming so miserable that like literally the choice of continuing that life was so painful. I was like, I need to just try something differently because I can't go on doing this.
Tell
So
me
almost
about it,
like hitting
right? Like,
hitting
yeah.
rock bottom. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of the thing that was like, okay, it's time to start making a difference.
Well, it's crazy. I remember when I used to read, when I used to teach bioethics, we used to, we'd have a lot of anecdotal evidence from people who like had a terminal illness and then had like, they would call like miraculous recovery. Like doctors couldn't explain why they got better. But in all
Hmm.
those cases, when they interviewed the patient, their lives would be totally different afterwards. Because it's just
Hmm.
like, I realized like I could go at any moment. Most of us block that out of our heads all the time. We just ignore it. We don't think about the reality that we could literally die today. And so like, and all those people were like, what was I doing with my life? Like, a lot of them like maybe got out of relationships they didn't like, or quit their jobs and did something totally different, traveled, whatever they wanted to do, but their lives changed dramatically and they were way happier. And it's
Hmm.
funny, you see similar things from people who like hit rock bottom with like addiction and stuff and then recover because like all of a sudden they start doing things that they wanted to do differently, or starting to deal with problems that they were facing and stuff, and getting healthy. And I think it's funny that we don't take this initiative earlier. We wait till
Yeah.
it's like so bad that it's smacking us literally in the face or almost killing us, right? To
Hmm.
realize that like, oh my God, I could do things differently and live a different life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe the miraculous recovery, like all the psychosomatic medicine stuff, that's all along the same lines. Because it's all just like if we keep lying to ourselves, our body just
Yeah.
has to find another way to tell us what's
And
going on.
medicine's also fairly new.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
we don't understand everything yet, and there's things that just happen, like, and they can't always explain it. It's also why you get a
Yeah.
lot of these weird, like, pseudoscience remedies for stuff because the person doesn't know how they got better. They just got better.
Hmm.
And so, it's
Yeah.
like I ate a lot of
Yeah.
oranges, you know.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. So other than that, I think that's about why are you waiting?
Don't
I
wait.
think it's
Yeah.
well, it's kind of like okay, so like there I think it comes down to we talk about like values and figuring out what's important to you. And I think that's an important thing because you can't do everything. And if you're in a really bad spot, doing anything will make a difference.
Yeah.
But like if you're at a point where you've got a job, you've got a family, you've got kids, you've got the mortgage, you've got the cars, you've got the pets. I mean, there's just you don't have any time. So like figuring out what's most important and just letting everything else kind of take care of itself.
Yeah, which
But
is
then,
sometimes hard to do, if not impossible, because you have responsibilities, right? So finding carving that time out for yourself too to make those decisions. Also giving
hmm
yourself time to think about things, actually sit down and think about them and what you
hmm
really want, rather than, because I think our other problem is we get stuck in like the motions and it
yeah,
becomes like automatic.
Well,
where we don't think.
it's so easy not to think because we're constantly being indoctrinated with all the stuff we're scrolling through. And so it's
Yeah,
so easy not
and
to
we're
think
so
and just to
busy all the
be like
time now.
brainwashed. Yeah.
Yeah. And people, work comes home with people are busy all the time. So you have to like literally carve that time out, right?
I know. One of the dudes I work with at the co-working space, he works like 10-hour days. And I'm like, what are you doing this weekend? He's like, I have a whole bunch of projects I need to finish up. I was like, don't you tell the people that you have a life that like you
Yeah.
work at work and but I don't know.
It's hard though. I think that's the other problem, right? Is like we take on too much. We all feel like we have to be like the main person in everything. And
Yeah.
we have all these false beliefs that things are going to be perfect. There's going to be a
The
time
weight
where if
of
we
the
can make this
world
change.
rests on my
Yeah.
shoulders, kind of like the Colosseum here. He
Yeah.
can
Yeah, I remember I had a buddy who
call
he
me Atlas.
after law school he got a job and he was like, well, it's hard, he's like, it's a good job, but it's hard. Like I have to work like 70 hours a week. I was like, damn, dude. I was like, what are you gonna do? Like that's like so much time. He's like, well, but he's like, I'll make a lot and then when I retire, I'll do all this stuff. I'm like, that is not a good plan.
Yeah.
That is a terrible plan. Because one,
Yeah.
you're gonna be used to doing that, grinding.
Yeah.
So you're gonna feel like,
Well,
a mess when you don't do anything. And then you're gonna have to figure out what you like because you won't know anymore. Because
and you'll
everything
be
will
in
have
such
changed.
bad health that like you won't
Yeah,
be able to travel because you won't be able to fit into a plane seat. You
no.
won't be able to walk upstairs wherever you go. And yeah.
It's
All right.
crazy. Well, there you have it, though. So, stop wasting your life waiting for the perfect moment. Don't do that. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. If you guys have episode ideas, drop them in the comments in the YouTube video or email us. Our email's in the show notes. You can contact us that way too. We'd love to do episodes that like interact with the audience. That's always fun. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Until next time, though, later, Randy.
Later, Danny.